They're the real odd couple of showbiz. He, the quietly spoken 4 times married father of 4, she, the brash and glitzy housewife superstar. But for 45 years, Barry Humphries and his alter ego, Edna Everage, have had audiences round the world rolling in the aisles. Normally, Barry Humphries hides behind the gaudy skirts and lurid spectacles of dear old Edna. But at home in Melbourne, he introduced us to his real self. I met Barry Humphries on a gondola on a summer's afternoon on the Youre. The location seemed just right, a kitsch clash of cultures. So would you call this home, Barry?
Well, yes. You know, when I've been back a few days, I feel I've never been away. Elizabeth, I always carry a copy of the Melbourne Street Directory with me. It's very nice reading. I keep thinking, well, there's a street I haven't been up.
Barry first ran away from Melbourne 40 years ago. Back then, he yearned for exotic cities where you couldn't drink the water. He's come back anyway. Barry, when you fill out your immigration card, what do you write where it says occupation?
I've always worried about that occupation because I've never been entirely sure what I did. I generally write artiste with an E because we people in the theatre are called artistes. That's the old word for us. Sometimes I write bird mimic if I'm feeling facetious.
Gladdy time. What other show does this? Could you imagine Barry Manilow doing this? Or Stevie Wonder? Not in a million years.
Do you like Edna more now than ever before?
Well, I do. I disapprove of almost everything she says. And, in fact, I cringe at some of the things that the woman says, but I've come rather to respect her right to say them.
What's happened to the front row, that stupid old nun?
Because you have been accused of racism, fascism, sexism,
Oh, yes.
ageism.
Oh, good. The more the better.
Beautiful. Oh, you smell lovely. Thank you. I always loved garlic prawns.
When I devised characters like Mrs. Everage, I was attempting to avenge myself, really, against my background and against the oppressive, bigoted, highly restricted suburban society into which I'd been born. It's only after I've got to know them over so many years that I see their redeeming features.
Because I think you said with Edna, in the first instance, she was created because you hated her.
Well, it was a type that I particularly detested. And you found them everywhere, of course. They were masquerading as very nice people.
Come away with me, Lucille, in my merry old mobile.
In a car very like this, we would go out for a family drive on a Sunday afternoon. And the idea was to look at the lovely homes. You just cruise very slowly along the street, looking at brand new houses. And they were called lovely homes.
It's clinker brick, isn't it?
Yes, that is, I think. It's a block of flats. Pretty unusual in Melbourne until the late 30s. Flats were considered rather raffish. People who lived in flats, you know, drank and had girlfriends, that sort of thing.
Did you aspire to live in a flat?
To live in a flat was the most exciting thing you could possibly do.
Barry grew up in this house in suburban Camberwell. His mother, Louise, was obsessively houseproud. So too his father, Eric, of the houses he built here. He wanted Barry to be an architect, but the interest in bricks and mortar lives on in Edna.
What type of a home have you?
Well, it's a sort of prefab.
It's what?
Prefab.
A prefab?
Right. It's a very nice one.
I'm sure it's a nice home.
In the character of Edna, I still express an interest in the houses that members of my audience live in. She's a bit like a kind of crazed real estate agent.
You're adorable. Not so young anymore either, are you, Billy?
Actually, there are an extraordinary number of things down here. Buried deep in the basement of the Victorian Arts Centre is a treasure chest of Barry's theatrical memorabilia. He's donated hundreds of items to ensure some sort of lasting legacy of his work.
There aren't very many men who can look at clothes like this and say, memories, memories. That was, I think, a Christmas number.
Look at
I think it might have been Christmas.
And you know...
Edna's head is slightly larger than mine.
Is that right? There are over 200 frocks in the collection. Each one tells a story.
Oh, this, I think, has been worn only once at the Los Angeles Olympic Games.
Oh, you could bring that out again.
So it's in the Australian colours, but it has a little marsupial touch. You see? The Olympic flag.
You could resurrect that. It's not too late.
I think this should be de-accessioned by the museum.
What do children think of Dame Edna?
Well, of course, they enjoy it very much because it must be nice to have a father whose job you can explain. Imagine how you would explain being a quantity surveyor to your children.
Yes,
or even a solicitor.
How do you think then your children would have described your job?
Dressing up.
Dad dresses up.
It's dressing up. It's playing.
If I'm able to ask you about your wife, Lizzie.
Yes, sure.
She is the love of your life.
Yes, I'm very fortunate. I mean, I think people mature at different levels. You know, I haven't had a great record as a husband.
Does that worry you?
I've married some remarkable women, and they've not had a terribly easy time. Life's okay for them now, I'd like to think. But I think I'm the sort of person who should have got married when I finally got married.
Does it worry you when you read a magazine? You may not read a magazine, but a magazine says, Barry Humphries, I was a sex addict?
No. In fact, I think it's not a very accurate description of me. You've had no difficulties with me, have you?
No. At this stage, everything seems just fine.
I've been as busy as a Beirut bricklayer, as a matter of fact. Think it over, think it over. I've been as busy as a one-armed taxi driver with crabs. Got a mental picture of that? I've been as busy as a one-legged man in an ass-kicking competition.
He's crass and he's very funny. But not everyone gets the joke with that other great Humphries character, Sir Les Patterson. Critics like Republican campaigner Malcolm Turnbull aren't impressed.
I've been as busy as Salman Rushdie's travel agent.
He thought that your humour was denigrating Australia, that you were unpatriotic as well, and that's fairly recently.
Oh, well, you know, fortunately, I mean, you can't really win everybody.
Are these humourless people, are they?
I think they generally are, and often they're people who've not even been to one of my shows. Quite often they're academics, or they're, you know, ambitious politicians. I don't know.
One of your earliest critics also was your mum.
A mother?
Your mother.
Well, my mother was my most trenchant critic. I mean, she would have put Mr. Turnside to absolute shame. Is that his name?
Turnbull.
Oh, we should know it. He's gone to enough trouble to remind us. Poor little fellow. My mother was certainly a very difficult woman to please.
Did that hurt?
Yes. Frankly, from my mother it hurt. I think it's the only adverse criticism that's really ever stung me. But then I've compared notes with a lot of other people, and mothers are a little bit like that.
Your mother did once say, we do not know where Barry came from.
We don't know where Barry came from. That was one of her more alarming utterances.
Barry Humphries, in his different guises, is perhaps our most famous cultural export. For years, his chat shows on foreign television have introduced audiences and disbelieving celebrities to the blunt edge of Australian humour.
My husband is a registered charity driver. prostate sufferer. Have any of your hubbies had prostate problems?
I never give them enough time.
In Britain, Edna is treated like royalty.
I happen to be the Queen of Australia.
But back in Australia, she's sniffed the breeze, and Edna, at least, has decided to become a Republican.
And this is going to be something very, very special, because it's the first show I've done for years as Mrs. Everage. I'm relinquishing my damehood.
I keep reading you're a monarchist.
I like monarchies on the whole. They're nice places to be. We've got a system that works terribly well. I don't think the Queen's probably forgotten Australia exists. I don't think she's ever likely to interfere in our politics, and I think she'll be immensely grateful when the inevitable happens and Australia becomes the republic that we will become.
In your autobiography, you said that the Republican movement was a form of pommy bashing.
Well, it is. I think you find most of the most vociferous champions of a republic are of Irish descent.
That's a little severe, though, isn't it?
It's true.
Being of Irish descent automatically means you don't like English?
It almost does. And I don't blame them one little bit.
And that's the size of the lemon tree.
The lemon tree.
The State Theatre in Sydney. And Barry is fine-tuning his one-man show. The title, Remember You're Out, was inspired by a saying of his mother's. It's the show that will take Barry to America later this year for the Broadway hit he's craved all his career. When this story goes to air, you'll be 65.
Oh, my God, thank you for reminding me. Very well preserved.
You are.
They'll want proof, those viewers.
You don't feel 65?
No, not at all. Someone has said that the tragedy of growing old is that you don't.
And you absolutely have not grown old.
I'm very energetic and very childish behind this kind of pompous exterior.
Will Edna retire, do you think?
Could.
I mean, a critic has said Edna should retire. But
A critic has. Who?
a London critic
Said
suggested
Edna should retire.
go to a twilight home, I think.
Well, perhaps she may be right. I don't know. It's up to my audiences to judge.
But is that what you will judge it on, when you figure that the audience has had enough?
Well, I think when I have, to hell with the